Hello, and welcome to the Share the Pear Hybrid Learning with Pear Deck presentation by me, Art Walkles. As you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, this presentation is going to help you open and install Pear Deck add-ons, add and edit interactive questions that work with Google Slides and Pear Deck, and then lastly, to present with Pear Deck. This will be a total of 15 minutes running time. But the presentation itself can be kind of paused and put to the side to work on Pear Deck, and then come back to it as you get along in your understanding of how to use the add-on in Google Slides. So to begin with, this presentation itself is actually located in a place that is linked in this attachment. And so you can get that by reviewing the email, but then also looking at the place where this personalized learning introduction is located, which David Hilgendorf presented last month. One of the things that we're doing is trying to establish more understanding of personalized learning throughout Park Center. And if you couldn't participate in that December, it might be a good idea to go back to that and take a look at it, particularly because all of these activities, as long as you pursue something to include personalized learning in your classroom, you can get funding or payment based off of our Bush Foundation grant. All right. You'll find the link to that in this presentation. It is also attached as well. All right, so first thing that I want to present is this idea of Pear versus the rest. So a lot of things are flying at us all the time about the distance learning and specifically what it is about remote learning and distance learning and how we can kind of provide this. The three that really come up the most with relation to Pear Deck are kind of similar types of tools, and that's Nearpod, Desmos, and Edpuzzle. Desmos is the one that seems to have come up a lot this year. Nearpod and Edpuzzle were presented the last couple years. Basically, what I'm going to say is Edpuzzle, it's supported by the district, so it's out there, it's usable. You can link to it through Schoology, sorry. Desmos is more new this year. It's very much more math focused, but really all of them are more activity based. So it's basically something where you're putting it on a screen or a presentation tool and seeing students work on it at the same time. And the way that Pear Deck's different is it actually works with Google Slides, and it's a little bit more functional for knowledge checking. It works with a format that most of our students are really comfortable with Google Slides, and it really provides embedded activities that go a little bit more with a presentation for all kinds of disciplines, not just say English, math, social studies, or just science. It's like everything. It can be added to any previous presentation, which is awesome. So if you've ever made Google Slides presentations, all you got to do is add on the Pear Deck, and then you can start using the functions. Now, it's not supported as far as data privacy is concerned for our district, which means like the district isn't going to pay for it, but it is a possibility that I'll talk about later that we might be able to add it as a school. If you look off on the left-hand side here, the kind of in my opinion part is that this is basically a virtual whole class presentation tool where you can actually engage with each individual student, whether they're in your room or outside of it, based on presentation of information. So you can kind of see how they're working in your class as you're presenting. They could actually be out in the hallway and you could be presenting. They can do all of this, which I think is going to become kind of the mindset when we come back from digital distance learning, because the kids are not going to just lose these things they've been doing for a year. You know, the concept of adding to Google Meet from a kid working in a completely different place while you're presenting that information, but still being in a brick and mortar school, that's the future. And that's really one of the more powerful things about this presentation. So here's a few awards and recognition aspects. I don't work for the company, but I'm just kind of putting it in here because this is part of their overall presentation. Now, this is a slide that I think is good to kind of maybe take a pause on and just read it over. Really, these are just some of the elements that they say, like if you're doing this in a distance learning experience, these are some of the things that you may want to do. All right, well, I'm going to get started now with the idea of how you would open and get this started. Now, I'm going to actually not present it to you. This would have been more of a synchronous type of lesson where you are participating, and you can sign up in the asynchronous version, which would have been in a follow-up email after the presentation. If you have any questions, please look at the email in the personalized learning presentation, and you can email me at walcolsa.district@district279.org. But typically you would sign up using Joy PD. And you would end up having two screens, a student view and a trainer view. The student view would maybe have your presentation mode and your presentation, and then you would have what your students are working on with also a view of your dashboard. As we move back into the classroom, this may obviously change, and you just have to kind of get used to that. I'm not going to be linking you to this presentation because this would be after the point where my asynchronous version has expired in February at the end of the month. But I'm just going to kind of quickly take you through some of the slides and some of the ways that you can use Pear Deck once we come back into the classroom. But it still works for distance learning as well. So this first part is going to really focus on some of the basic elements that are provided in Pear Deck. Some of the types of activities or skills, if you will, that get embedded into your presentation. So the whole mission of Pear Deck is to make it so you can either do an in-classroom during the day distance learning, in the morning or at night. But ultimately, once kids start coming back to school, we want to really kind of focus on where they're working in the school day. Now, typically they would be right here, right in the middle. They would be in your classroom. And obviously because of the pandemic that has changed. But what we want to try to figure out is, well, maybe they aren't in your classroom at this point. Maybe they're going to engage in this assignment outside or in the morning, and they're going to prep for the thing that you're going to do in that. So that's kind of the way you want to use this, is instead of spending time in your classroom presenting a lot of this information and seeing their engagement, you're presenting information, seeing how they engaged, and then following up with it the next day. Here's one example. Now, obviously, this is much more interactive if you use it in Pear Deck, but basically, there are several options for the types of questions. One is like choosing an option A, B, or C. So you would ask a question, and then they can choose A, B, or C, and you can see where everyone is or how much you know about it with your answers. Another example of a question is the draw or type or label part. So this goes into whatever slide you have, and then they would draw right on the screen. Another example is a draggable type of thing, where they drag this little icon into the place where the question announces. Another type of this questions is the text question. It's saying write a response. When we're working as teachers, we can see what they're writing on the other side. So those are just 4 examples of the types of questions. And basically, whatever slide you put up, this is what shows up at the bottom. All right, so you can have anything written, whatever you want in the middle, and you're just adding something so that students can engage with that question. Here's another example of entering a number, maybe more geared towards math students. And we can follow that up with maybe a response question again. How do you decide that? I can see what their response is, and I can come up with an idea of whether they knew it or not and how they got to that, and then maybe reteach as I'm watching what they're responding. I can comment directly on what they're writing. I can also kind of anonymously mention it as they're writing too. You might not want to call out a kid individually for a wrong answer by name, but you may say, well, somebody answered this. This is really what we want to kind of gear towards trying to find that answer. Here's another example of a way that you can do this by using a website. So you can link a site and have kids go and view this and then come back and then maybe just have a little discussion of what they watched or saw or did in that website. Here's another example of a drag the icon. So this is another thing where students can pull kind of a stress test of where they are, and you can kind of gauge like, well, maybe do I have to go back? So for example, if people are being bothered, I could say, could you raise your hand? Or if I'm live, I could say, which thing are you confused about? Maybe it's like for all of you, some of you were confused as to where Algeria was. And so then I would say, well, actually, this is the correct location for it. All right, so these are the teacher tools that exist, and they're basically all embedded into this add-on that is in Google Slides. And there's a little bit more on how to do that here in the minutes to come. Typically, the way that people are going to join is by doing joinpd.com. And there's a couple ways that when you go into the dashboard and you start a presentation, Basically, it comes up with this screen, and then students can either get the link directly to use this code to join in. You can also do this through Google Classroom and anonymous join, but typically at Park Center, we're going to use the Join PD aspect, where they go to that site and link in. And when they do, your presentation will then show up to them that you've started. All right, so just to quickly recap a little bit, these are the types of tools that you'll have. You have the text, you have the choice, you have numbers, you have the use of a website to be embedded for them to visit, you have the drawing and the draggable. So all of these things are things that you can put directly on a slide that you made, or you can click on it and add things to it so that students can respond to it. One of the things that Pear Deck really suggests is adding ways for students to encourage participation. I would suggest that you keep things anonymous and just view it as your own, but there's different ways that you can see it as it shows up in the Pear Deck dashboard. You can do it by list, grid, and overlay. This is an example of what a list looks like. The students would be listed with their responses. You can scroll up and down to see what they've said. Grid, they're all posted around, and then overlay, they would basically all just show where they've written this thing on this slide directly. All right, so here we would ask you to summarize what you've learned, and you'd give that written response. What I want you to do is not really just summarize it, but I want you to think about the types of ways to join, the types of slides, the presenter tools, and how the dashboard works. And I basically want you to go ahead and start workshopping. I want you to do the following. This is the point where you would open Pear Deck, you would go into Google Slides, and you would click on this little arrow that says Open Pear Deck Add-on. Once you get to that point, you are then going to see this little screen on the right. All right? And at this point, when you want to start a lesson, you would present it. And a lot of this is more just taking a Google Slide presentation, making sure you have the Add Pear Deck add-on. If you don't have it yet, you're going to need to go into your Chrome extension and add it through there, and then it'll pop up and you can follow these steps. So you may want to pause right now just to see what this is saying and follow through after you've added the extension. All right, how do we do it? We can start right here. If you can go and click on peardeck.com/home, that'll bring you right to the Pear Deck website, which will let you get into the ideas of how you can build and continue to make different Pear Deck presentations. So coming out of here, I want to make sure that you can install the add-on, add interactivity templates, create a new slide, question types, explore peardeck.home, and present a lesson with Pear Deck. All of these things should be doable for you to just get yourself started. And for many of you, it'll take, 1 or 2 minutes. If you need a little bit more assistance or some one-on-one help with this, please make sure that you reach out to me, Art Wackels, at wackels@district279.org.